Good evening and welcome to this edition of Defacto Review with Jargal Defacto and myself, Grace Brown, bringing you a weekly roundup of news and current affairs here in Mongolia. We're live on Facebook at V Television. You can also follow the conversation on Twitter, #Defacto, coming up on the programme. Mongolia's Prime Minister Jargal Erdenbat is voted out by Parliament. What's next for the government? Mongolia's President Hotma Batorga meets leaders from Russia, South Korea and Japan, talking trade and North Korea. Multiple investment forums showcase opportunities in Mongolia as ICBC opens in Ulaanbaatar. And the annual Achilles Marathon gets underway to support Mongolians with disabilities. Thank you for joining us. After just 14 months in office, Mongolia's Prime Minister Jargal Erdenbat and his cabinet have been voted out by Parliament. There were 73 out of 75 MPs present on Thursday's vote, including 33 from the Mongolian People's Party and 9 from the Democratic Party, along with independent MPs, voting them out. Now, Jargal, this comes after multiple allegations of corruption, correct? Including contracts between ministers and companies worth $328 million, including the Minister of Justice. Is that right?
There is a chronology of a lot of wrongdoings in this, not only within this cabinet, but the cabinet before and before. You cannot just say exactly name by name everything, because it is a matter of to be approved by the court. But what is clear is, first time in history of the country, the ruling party, which has 65 seats, in cooperation with the opposition party, which has 10 seats, and they have voted against the cabinet. So it is very remarkable event. There is very, very remarkable in which sense? Now it's a time for thinking for Mongolia, what is wrong with all this? What is wrong is the problem is with in Mongolia, the main reason of this whole resignation of this cabinet and before frequently about total average, it was 19-month-old cabinets all the time. And all this...
The average, Mongolia's average cabinet age, 19 months.
Since 1990. And there is only one reason of all this. That's corruption. And this corruption became so big in this country, so unmanageable, that even the strongest seats political party cannot manage inside. And it is like a cancer in the body of society, this corruption. There is only one reason. How is it happening? Through two forms. One is it's a conflict of interests, of public and personal interests. People are coming to the political power and misusing their power for their personal interests. And still making money and
doing business with various companies while in their post.
You can make two forms of their corruption. One is high-ranking positions, which gives them opportunity to mismanage public fund. Secondly, it is by all means, they are trying to misuse budget. So let's go to the first one, high-ranking official positions. Mongolian ruling parties raising fund through selling public high-ranking positions. 60 billion Tugriks plan was revealed, disclosed somehow. But there are so many other talks which is not disclosed. People's Party, though, announced it officially and openly that whoever is running for this position, that million Tugriks, that position, that million Tugriks, they just put price tag bluntly and openly. In general, those who is donating big money to their political party receives high positions in this country. Secondly, you were talking about the concessions. Once they have the power, they misuse that power and they use budget money for example, in this case, concessions.
Concessions mean contracts with companies.
It's a large contracts of projects. to be made or built or cooperate and then transfer to the cabinet, to the government. Or in this case, is already existing private projects were sold to the government through this concessions form, which have involved current existing ministers.
Sounds very lucrative.
But as I told you, because we were talking a lot about corruption, not combating seriously, it was initial form of the corruption was in the form of privatization. They have been misusing, the people who had the power misusing privatization process, they got a lot of money. Second one is the bonds. Through the Chinggis bond, etc., through the foreign debt, a lot of the political party leaders and their associates made money. The third now is the concessions. The things are becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. And I don't know what is the next if we don't combat this corruption. So where this correction comes from, that's the question, right?
Well, how safe is the Speaker of Parliament, Miagombo Enkbold, given that he is also in the MPP and lost the election, the recent presidential election?
It's interesting because he is a head of Mongolian ruling party, People's Party, right? He's a speaker. But during all this process of resignation and before that, all these different levels of discussions, nobody raised the question of the major source of Mongolian corruption, which is the political party financing. And today what this resignation means for me is a redistribution of power. Again, it will be new power is coming, is taking over again, the same story will be repeated. Unless there will be a leader who will bring this issue to the table. And there is a small hope, because now for the new cabinet, it will take at least 45 days, maximum 45 days,
right,
according to our law. But during this time, what will happen is a small conference, what's the different name? Executive conference, then Congress of the ruling party will happen within this, within this month. And that means People's Party will change their head.
Do we have any indication at this point who that might be? I've heard that possibly the Deputy Prime Minister Horosok could be a contender, even though he tried to resign.
The largest
recently.
talk is about him. But however, if they go deeply into the political party's financing, they may change the view, if they will go. Because only in that case, very strong leader who will raise this issue can be selected as People's Party. 65 parliament members are divided, and it's just straight divide, 32, 35, 32, 33. So these two will have a long time to have a consensus on the head of the party, which will be the prime minister of the country. So it will take a long consensus unless that leader is coming, talking about the internal issues of political party, internal democracy, which is not there. And that's why they are so afraid of this political party financing that they did not raise. And Democratic Party is also, they are also not raising the issue because it's the same situation.
They're all tainted by the same stick. So what happens next? We have some indication of the time frame. All of these ministers can still influence policy in the next 45 days?
They are acting from 2 days ago. Well, it's also very dual role, because which time they will be preparing for their living and which time they will be spending for their work. It's a very relative issue. Very familiar non-action situation in Mongolia, which usually happens like this every 2 years.
This means that legislation, much needed legislation, can't be passed.
There will
be more delays.
Prolonged or delayed, postponed, and our parliament members will be more busy now in coming a month or so with new candidates. Many of them want to be a minister, they expressed it so. So shall we have again the cabinet with, we call it double daily? which is executive parliament member and cabinet member. The more we have them, we have a more chance to have a less leaving cabinet. Because it will be always a very controversial situation, because when lawmaker is cabinet member, and it's always a big trade in between them is happening for power, and it always diverting the cabinet, the power of Mongolia from the main business, which is a normal, open, transparent governance of the country, which is not the case.
Will President Batulga need to approve the new Prime Minister and the new cabinet?
According to our law, he is first to approve himself the Prime Minister, which will be again approved by he will be nominated in a way, the jury nominated to that Prime Minister to the Parliament, which will approve. But that is very tricky questions now, because Mr. Batulga has on agenda now, in particular as he's promising he will be fight very seriously against corruptions. So let's see, it's very interesting drama is going on in the country, and I think the next acts will be even more interesting.
Well, moving on, the Eastern Economic Forum, which was held in the Russian port city of Vladivostok this week, took place with leaders from Russia, Mongolia, South Korea and Japan attending, among others. Jagul, you were there, and there's a lot to talk about, but let's start with two key topics, I think, trade and North Korea. Talking trade, Mongolia's deficit with Russia was $1.5 billion in 2013. When President Batulga met with President Putin, did they discuss how they could fix this?
Well, they discussed shortly, but however, I was not at the meeting as I am not the official part of the delegation. I was just asked to moderate business forum between two countries. A lot of businesses were there. We had a charter flight from here full of businesses and politicians. And on the Russian side, there were big, large, very high status delegations. And at that business forum, which we discussed these two issues you are raising, there was a highest ranking official was the President Putin assistant, Mr. Levitin, and also there was a Minister for Natural Resources and Ecology of Russia, Mr. Donskoy, who is
Sergei
also
Donskoy, yep.
Who is a head of the government commissions between two countries, one of the heads.
And he actually raised the possibility of a Eurasian economic free trade zone with Mongolia that could be active as early as, that it could be agreed upon as early as next year. Is that correct?
Yes, there were interesting, there was other Deputy Minister of Agriculture, which raised very interesting issue about trade, and several large companies like Russia Railways, or oil company, or another investment company, Renova, etc. So very high-ranking officials were there, businesses, and mostly two talks. First, about the trade size, to be exact, the deficit, $1.5 billion deficit in favor of Russia. We buy completely all our gas products from Russia, and we sell very little things, and we cannot import right now, export right now as we want our meat, milk, etc., agriculture products. And Minister of this Agriculture said that it is veterinary conditions that prevent to do so.
Issues like foot and mouth at the moment, for example.
And that's why the Russians are trying to helping, and they've produced a lot of vaccines from this year. And 150 Mongolian companies are certified for being ready or certified
to use these vaccines from Russia.
Not only, they are also the process of their production of meat, etc. Means allowed or permitted in Russia by that certification, which is another good news. And also new students are becoming in that direction, studying. And you talked about this Eurasia Economic Commission. You know, this is a former customs organization of Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Russia. They now call it this Eurasia Economic Commission, which is kind of subnational, above national organizations which agree customs issue in between three countries. Now Mongolia are negotiating with that so that we go through these countries.
Wow.
All this customs.
Could open up a lot of opportunities.
So that's what's waited for. The second, but still they keep negotiating now. It is not final. I understand the process was very fast now, according to this Mr. Donskoy. Second issue, very interesting, was the president and some delegations were taken by helicopter to Russia, the Far East, two major ports, Nakhodka and Vostochny.
Vostochny is the one with the railways, correct? Where they
mostly coal concentrated port. And there are other four ports that our president has seen it, and Russia was suggesting certain port, not necessarily these two, but nearby one. We can make investment there, make our own port, so that we can transport our coal through that port to Japan and other countries. But a very interesting moment, we should note that from Tavantolga through Saint-Chand, we have 5,000 kilometers to reach that port. Tavantolga to down the Chinese border, but if we go directly to the port, Tianjin, it is a half of that about. But however, a couple of years ago, Russian government promised that they will give the same tariff for Mongolia as we go to Tianjin. They will match that tariff for transport, which is, of course, it's less effective for Russia's side. But if they go as they promised, Mongolia will have two alternative, alternating to access to two ports, which we think
which could
ease
be
our
huge,
trade terms with China.
Right, that there could be a big relief given the traffic that we're seeing down near the Chinese border these days, right?
Yeah, but rationally, probably the Chinese will be more rational. But if China is, finding many reasons, as they do, some days they close the border, some days they prolong, extend the customs procedures, etc., and which makes a lot problem.
So it's good for Mongolia to have its eggs in more than one basket for sure.
But however, for that we need to complete the transport agreement with Russia, which initially penned, we say, by two ministers at the level of government.
Okay.
But now this should go through their related parliaments, Russia and Mongolia.
Right.
That will be signed. If they sign,
to be
it's approved,
officially approved,
certified.
nationally.
Yes. It's called verified, or there is a particular word. But if this is approved like this, then we will have access to other ports of Russia throughout all Russia to go through to other countries, which is a good and long-awaited news for us.
Well, another big topic, as we mentioned, was North Korea. President Betulga met with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, along with South Korea's President Moon Jae-in, and Betulga and Abe agreed to a joint response against Pyongyang's nuclear program, including following UN sanctions. But Mongolia has more than 1,000 North Korean workers here, including one who fell off a building and died in Ulaanbaatar this week. Is that likely to change anytime soon?
Well, first of all, they have to discuss the issue, because it is after a few days after a series of nuclear tests of North Korea, and our president, the Japanese Prime Minister, have talked about that. Mongolia should join that sanctions, of course, and this will touch this issue you raised. But practically how it works, I don't know. Probably it's a matter of sending them back or not having any more. So this technically, I don't know how the procedure will go, but certainly I think it will include this sort of measure. We are otherwise not much connections with them. Another thing was North Korea have asked us permission to fly directly from Ulaanbaatar to Ulaanbaatar. So probably it will be
direct flights
delayed. Yes,
Pyongyang to Ulaanbaatar. So this might be delayed.
It comes only initially to my mind.
Yes, yeah, it's very interesting because Mongolia is one of the few countries to hold diplomatic relations with both South and North Korea.
There's a very historic reason for that.
Yes.
Because we have been receiving a lot of children from North Korea until they grow up in Mongolia. Even they have a Mongolian mothers and they speak Mongolian, so we have very long human relations, peoples to peoples relations with North Korea. That's why we keep our diplomatic relations with North Korea.
It's fascinating. Well, let's talk about investing in Mongolia now, because several key forums were held here this week, including Discover Mongolia, Invest Mongolia, and Call Mongolia. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you know, they're attempting to showcase the country's growth opportunities, with growth rebounding to 4.2% in the first quarter, up from just 1% last year. What areas is Mongolia trying to attract money into, Jargal? And do you think that these forums succeeded?
Very funny situation with this major 3 investment promotion events of Mongolia. As you said, Call Mongolia, Discover Mongolia, Invest Mongolia. All of them are from 7 to 11 years annual conferences. But somehow it is managed or organized so poorly that they go day after day. And all they discussed was the stability of the government of Mongolia. And the last day the government resigned.
Prime Minister Erdogan promised stability, and then 2 days later this vote to oust him comes. Most unfortunate.
And it's very sarcastic also. It's very ironic drama happening in the country. Unfortunately, and we talk about the stability of our governance, yet we are doing what we do now. And these 3 events actually are important, each of them individually. Call Mongolia, for example, always talk about details, problems, bottlenecks of our production, transportation, and sales. This time, a very strange thing was Chinese ambassador had not arrived. And several delegations we were waiting from China did not arrive. And it is just something that we have to think over again, but we notice it.
So China was not a major player at these forums, which is interesting because this week China's Industrial and Commercial Bank of China opened its first representative office here in Ulaanbaatar.
Exactly, and these conferences will not have much sense without China, because everything what we produce goes to China. And I was thinking the other day, why we're always talking about investment into mining industry? How about we organize forum about the IT, for example, which not necessarily depends on China. Yes, the Chinese largest. By the way, this bank, ICBC.
ICBC,
right?
Yeah.
This is the largest bank in the world, and the 4 largest bank of China, the number 1. And their total asset is about $4 trillion US. For example, Japanese economy is $5 trillion US. So this bank alone is such a big power. But they have opened a rep office in Mongolia. Rep office is not allowed to have direct business in this country, on this territory. According to the president of this bank, who is
Mr. Gu Shu.
Yeah, according to this gentleman, he said, we go after what our customers request. So we have more business with China, and it says also the rep office will do research work and project analysis so far.
And he said there would be a lot of potential for cooperation in industrial and financial sectors.
It is, in particular with the initiative of One Belt, One Road. We signed the contract in May. So Chinese companies...
What part does Mongolia play in that One Belt, One Road strategy?
Well, it's a good question. We talk a lot about
because it doesn't actually go through Mongolia. So what...
No, it should go through Mongolia according to the agreement, but it takes somehow a very long time. Actually, we talk about 3 railways corridors. We talk about 3 road corridors. And initially, the 3 countries agreed to do so, but somehow you know, maybe because it's too large for Mongolia countries, the dialogue goes so long. At every level, as I remember from the president, everybody, for the last 3 years, they keep talking, and nothing's moved.
Going back to ICBC, though, what are the pros and cons of having Chinese banks enter Mongolia's financial sector?
You know, this is the same situation with Bank of China. I don't think a Bank of Mongolia will give them immediately any permission to open a rep office.
And they'd have to lend at the same rates as Mongolian banks if and when they do open a branch?
No. If they will open their branch, they will extend, they will give money or borrow money, loan money at the level of their cost. I mean, where were they? This huge bank, 44 countries representation, either branch office or rep office. And out of those 44 in the world countries, 20 in Africa.
Wow. Yes, that's right, 44 worldwide.
And what's going on in Africa is in the large, all mega projects China is investing. So this money goes through these banks first. Secondly, with the, I think, One Belt, One Road, a lot of investment comes from China. They will require probably to go through this bank.
Right.
By that time, we need to give them permission.
So it could be bad for Mongolia's banks, very bad, but potentially good for Mongolian consumers and
in which sense? Now, having a rep office, like a Bank of China, they can already borrow money to Mongolian companies, but from Beijing. They make study negotiations here, but the Mongolian companies borrow in Beijing, which is the case with the many Mongolian companies. Now what's happening? The second tier or secondary, I mean, from the top already from Bank of China, now the next top can borrow from this bank from Beijing. Who are staying with the Mongolian commercial banks are the companies which is by the credibility lower than these companies. So that means Mongolian companies will lose a lot the best customers, and it means they will stay with higher risk companies and the rate may not be changing.
Very interesting. Well, thank you for explaining that, Jogul. And finally, the annual Achilles Mongolia Marathon took place this weekend in Ulaanbaatar with 2,500 people running on Saturday with the aim of raising money for Mongolians with disabilities. Mongolia is not the most accessible country, shall we say, for somebody with a disability. If you look
Speaking
at the
softly,
roads, infrastructure. They had hoped for 5,000 people to take part, but they only got half of that amount. You know, how can the idea of charity be expanded further here?
First of all, this lady,
Saranchula,
she had organized, she is herself disabled with one leg,
prosthetic leg, yeah.
And she's running. And
ran 42 kilometers in New York, yeah.
Can you? I mean, with 2 legs, many people cannot run 4
4
kilometers,
yeah.
and she does 45 kilometers, and we should congratulate her with her this outstanding brave steps. And she is also raising the awareness Mongolian society about care of these people, and we should care in spite of everything those who feels good. I mean, people usually feel bad only after they lose their health, and then we should help these people. And that awareness should be increased, and I think it was a very good event for that. Now hopefully it will be even more participants next year. But I thought, you know, in these connections, once you asked me, in Mongolia, in our society, companies who donate big money, any money to this sort of charity event, they should be tax exempted, which is not the case.
So maybe more tax breaks needed for companies
which does not
as well.
motivate Mongolian companies to donate because it's not tax exempted.
That's a huge issue that we should definitely discuss in more depth at a later time. But unfortunately, we are up, so that brings this edition of Defacto Review to an end. Thank you very much for joining us. And from Jogul and myself, Sakina Marare,
Thank you very much. Have a good night.